Some truths are powerful enough to destroy entire careers. Others leave cracks in marriages, invade medical privacy, and take away a person's right to live in peace. Laws change. The media never stops watching, and cameras appear before a child is even old enough to understand who they are. In fashion, sports, film, and courtrooms alike, the journey of living authentically has never been a smooth road. It does not erase struggle. It only changes the shape of it. And tonight, these stories lead us to a quieter question. When truth has a price, who gets to decide what that price is? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Your comments help us understand how these stories travel across space and time. Hunter Schafer. Hunter Schafer grew up in a quiet, rural area of North Carolina, far from the glare of runways and film sets, where rigid gender norms were firmly in place but rarely spoken about openly. From an early age, she learned to read the atmosphere around her, to know what should be kept private and what could be revealed. Painting and design became her refuge, giving form to emotions that had no safe space to exist. Everything changed when laws restricting transgender rights were introduced. Hunter did not step into the public eye as an artist, but as a legal voice, joining lawsuits and having her identity debated in courtrooms and headlines, even before she was ready to tell her own story. Fame came early, but without control. As her acting career took off, the pressure did not disappear. It merely changed shape. She chose to respond by reclaiming creative ownership, writing scripts, developing her own projects, and protecting her right to remain silent in the face of public demands for personal disclosure. Hunter's journey today is not a loud call for attention, but a calm presence, affirming that dignity can exist without the need for constant self-explanation. Do you think so? Do you believe transparency creates freedom? Or does it simply redirect pressure elsewhere? Pete Burns. Pete Burns entered the British music scene of the 1980s as an unmistakable phenomenon, with a soaring voice and an image that left the public both fascinated and unsettled. In a time that lacked the language to name difference, he appeared as a living question mark to cultural norms. Burns's appearance quickly became the center of attention. His hair, makeup, cosmetic alterations, and his challenge to gender boundaries often overshadowed the music itself. Burns rarely offered explanations. He allowed ambiguity to become his armor, a way to survive in an industry that prefers clear labels in order to maintain control. As his fame grew, so did the scrutiny. Interviews drifted away from art and toward his body and private life. Tabloids turned a complex human being into spectacle, reducing him to sensational headlines. Offstage, Burns lived relationships that defied simple categories, marrying, separating, and still maintaining deep connections that lasted for years. Yet, to the public, each relationship became evidence for speculation, rather than a reflection of genuine personal experience. Pressure followed, especially as cosmetic procedures increased and health complications emerged. The narrative surrounding Burns gradually distorted, shifting from the portrait of an artist aging within a harsh industry into caricature and cautionary tale. Even so, Burns never apologized for his public presence. He rejected the idea that being easily understood was something he owed to anyone. When he passed away in 2016, the noise continued. But what he ultimately left behind was not clarity, but the right to exist on his own terms. Caitlyn Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner spent much of her public life presenting an image built on strength and discipline. From Olympic champion to television personality and a central figure of a famous family, she learned to fulfill every role placed upon her. For many years, when society lacked both the language and safe space to speak about gender identity, Jenner chose silence as a way to preserve stability, accepting privacy as the price of peace. That balance collapsed in 2015, when she publicly shared her personal story on national television. ending decades of speculation while opening the door to unprecedented scrutiny. Her appearances that followed brought waves of support, but also intense surveillance. Her body, her past, and even her expressions became daily subjects of debate, judged by standards of authenticity set by the public rather than by herself. At the same time, controversial legal matters in her private life further complicated the narrative, blending sympathy with moral judgment. Yet Jenner did not withdraw from the public eye. She continued to appear, to speak, and to accept both praise and criticism. Her journey reveals the fragile boundary of public visibility. Reinvention can attract attention, but it does not erase consequences. Caitlyn Jenner's legacy stands between courage and cost, reminding us that once truth is made public, it can never fully belong to a single person again. James Dean. James Dean was born in a small town in Indiana at a time when post-war America was searching for new heroic figures. From the very beginning of his career, he approached acting not as something to perform, but as a way of expressing his inner self. Dean pursued methods that valued emotional truth over polished perfection, rejecting the style Hollywood favored, and quickly became a different presence among the era's traditional leading men. Success arrived swiftly. His roles, shaped by youth, rebellion, vulnerability, and longing, turned him into an icon for an entire generation. Yet that same image soon hardened into a fixed mold that studios tried to package, while tabloids amplified rumors about his private life. When confronted with questions about his identity and personal world, Dean chose not to answer directly. In the 1950s, such ambiguity was not provocation. It was a form of self-defense. It allowed him to preserve a fragile balance between his inner truth and his public image, but it also pushed him into isolation, constant surveillance, and a life rarely free from speculation. In 1955, a car accident ended his life at just 24, freezing his image in public memory. The legacy he left behind is not a complete explanation, but a lingering question about freedom and about what he refused to become. April Ashley. April Ashley was born in Liverpool at a time when personal identity had to be hidden in order to survive. From an early age, she understood who she truly was, but safety then came only through silence. In the early 1950s, Ashley left England for Paris to undergo gender-affirming surgery, then returned home hoping to live quietly, away from public attention. That fragile peace was shattered in 1961 when a tabloid exposed her past without consent. Overnight, her privacy was violated, her modeling work disappeared, and social invitations faded away. The upheaval did not end there. Her later marriage was brought before the courts, where a ruling narrowed womanhood to rigid biological criteria and created a legal precedent that lasted for years. Although she continued to live and work within the limits imposed on her, Ashley refused to erase herself. She wrote, spoke selectively, and became a quiet symbol of resilience. Her legacy is not only a change in law, but an enduring question. Should courts define identity or simply recognize it? Andrea Page. Andrea Page was born in Bosnia in the post-war period when upheaval forced her family to leave their homeland and begin again in Australia. From an early age, she understood her true self, but chose observation and adaptation over direct confrontation. She learned to read society's unspoken rules, keeping her truth private until the right moment. Her teenage years led her into the fashion industry, a world both drawn to and unsettled by her androgynous style and fluid beauty. Her career rose on an image of neutrality, while her personal life remained carefully protected. When she chose to publicly affirm her identity and her transition, many predicted it would be a setback. Instead, her career continued to expand across major runways and global campaigns. Though scrutiny remained, Andrea spoke about skill, discipline, and autonomy rather than her body. Her journey shows that quiet endurance, not noise, is what creates lasting change. Caroline Cassie. Caroline Cassie grew up in England during a period when the safety of transgender women depended on remaining unseen. From an early age, she learned to move carefully within social limits, understanding that self-determination sometimes meant choosing silence. After undergoing gender-affirming surgery abroad in the late 1970s, Casey returned home hoping to live an ordinary life, believing that privacy would offer protection. That belief collapsed when her modeling career began to rise, and she appeared briefly in a well-known film in the early 1980s. A tabloid article later exposed her private medical history without consent, turning her personal life into public spectacle. Overnight, career opportunities disappeared, professional relationships cooled, and waves of moral judgment followed. The greatest damage was not only professional but psychological. The burden of being forced to relive her story under public pressure. Her identity was no longer her own, but something shaped by headlines. Rather than disappearing, Casey chose to write and speak out, publishing a memoir to reclaim authorship and challenge the idea that survival must come with shame. Her legacy stands as a warning. Privacy is not a privilege, it is dignity. Patricio Manuel. Patricio Manuel grew up in California under the strict discipline of boxing, a sport that trains control, endurance, and focus. Long before society had common language to discuss identity, the ring gave him a rare sense of stability. For many years, training allowed Manuel to move forward without having to explain the unresolved parts of his inner life. When his transition began, that balance was challenged. Boxing is a world of rigid rules and strict classification, where bodies that fall outside expectations are often questioned. Manuel's license was delayed, regulatory bodies debated his eligibility, and constant scrutiny became unavoidable. Instead of retreating, he accepted medical reviews and administrative delays as the cost of remaining in the sport that had shaped his life. In December 2018, Manuel stepped into the ring for his first professional bout and won. The result was more than a score. It was a historic milestone. Yet the road ahead was not simplified. Attention often returned to identity rather than technique. Even so, Manuel continues to train and speak selectively, emphasizing that his presence is not a statement, but a right. Chaz Bono. Chaz Bono grew up under the spotlight long before he had the chance to define himself. As the child of two major entertainment icons, every stage of his life unfolded before cameras and public expectations. From his teenage years, a quiet mismatch existed between his inner self and the image the world saw, one that widened over time. For many years, Chaz tried to adapt through incomplete versions of truth, accepting partial identities in order to maintain stability. Public disclosures in the past brought attention, but not a sense of wholeness. Only after a long period of reflection and therapy did he arrive at the decision to change how he would exist in the world. That process happened in full public view, bringing mixed reactions, judgment, and family strain. Yet his steady resolve became a quiet declaration in itself. Today, Chaz continues to work in the arts and in community projects, serving as a reminder that choosing to live authentically has no age limit and always carries its own cost. Jessica Alves. Jessica Alves entered public life not through art or scholarship, but through controversial physical choices. Born in Brazil and later growing up in the United Kingdom, she was once known as the real-life Ken doll, an image constructed through a dense series of cosmetic procedures. Behind the glamorous exterior was a quiet instability, where surgeries were not only a search for attention, but also an attempt to mend a long-standing sense of displacement. Over time, the body's limits began to surface. Many doctors refused further procedures due to medical risks, and those warnings gradually revealed to the public the darker side of that journey. In 2020, Alves publicly began living under the name Jessica, marking a turning point rooted more in identity than in appearance. From that moment on, her story shifted away from surface aesthetics toward honesty, vulnerability, and the cost of trying to align with one's true self. Jessica's legacy is not merely one of shock value, but a reminder that admiration can sometimes conceal very real pain beneath it. And after everything, what truly remains is not just the images, but the stories of courage, vulnerability, and the deep desire to live authentically. Every journey carries a truth the world has not always been ready to see. Thank you for staying with us until the very last moment. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and follow the channel so you won't miss the next stories.